Welcome to Notes from the North with Kyle and Sam.
Welcome to Notes from the North, the official podcast of the Vikings Gazette. We're proud to partner with Vikings Territory, Purple PTSD, and Purple Territory Radio. If you're looking for great Vikings coverage, be sure to stop by these sites, and you're always welcome at the Vikings Gazette. And with that being said, let's get the first down. And Kyle, we had the draft this past weekend and lots of exciting things. And I just want to start off, is Rick Spielman the best GM in the league?
No, I don't think he's the best GM in the league, but I do think he's better than most, and I'd have a hard time believing he's not top 10. I do think he is a good GM, a very good GM.
Yeah, of course I kid. I know that there's obviously, and I don't even know if as a fan of a team you can even say that your GM's the best because there's just so much negativity around it. But just starting out with his first round, this was one of the best moves that any GM made. But the Vikings traded with the Jets, moved from 14 to 23, and they ended up getting Christiandarasaw at the end. So how do you feel about this pick?
You know, overall, I think you always have to understand like the pick within the context of not just the draft slot, so getting him a 23rd overall, but moving from 14th to 23rd. And I think that if they end up staying at 14th, it's basically a toss-up between Christiandarasaw and Elijah Vera-Tucker. It sounds to me like they were leaning towards left tackle. I know Spielman has indicated, and I think Zim as well, in the media press conferences afterwards, that they view Darrisaw as a left tackle. They didn't pick him to move him into left guard. They picked him to be their left tackle of the future. Zimmer specifically noted how long his arms are, which of course helps at tackle because you have the edge rushers coming off the edge. And so you want, go figure, edge rushers from the edge. And so you want obviously long arms to be able to get your hands on those guys. And so to me, I think that obviously left tackle, it's an extremely valuable position. They view Darrisaw as one of the kind of preeminent left tackles in this draft. And then to get him after trading down, I didn't think that was going to be possible. When that trade happened, I thought for sure Darrisaw was going to be gone. And in that sense, it was discouraging to me, especially once I saw that Vera-Tucker went 14th. Then I thought, oh my gosh, they got one. Because I'm not totally sold on Tevin Jenkins for the Vikings. So I was kind of thinking there's one tackle that really makes a lot of sense, unless they were to reach on someone else. But to get him at 23rd, to me, thought was very, very good.
Yeah, like when we talked last, like we both had projected Darrisaw in that 14th pick, and we were hoping like, hey, this is who we're hoping to get. And to get him 9 picks later and to get those 2/3 is quite incredible. Like that, your thoughts on the trade down, like, I don't know, it just feels just like a huge win.
Yeah, to me, it's tremendous value. Like I think my preference would have been in some ways to get that second round pick, and I was hoping that they would get a second round pick. Strictly because if you look at the past 5 or 6 years, the Vikings have done just incredibly well in the second round. That's where they got Eric Kendricks. That's where they got Dalvin Cook. They just got all kinds of just fantastic players in the second round. I don't think there's a bust in that group. At the very least, you have solid starters, and at the best, you have, all pro level, best at their position kind of players. And so I was hoping they'd get into the second round, but to go from 14 to 23, and then you get the 66th pick, and I think it was the 86th as well. I know they gave up the 4th, but to get those 2/3 is just tremendous, tremendous value. And then to still get your man in the end, to me, I think there was some luck involved. And I think if Spielman and Zim were being honest, there was a certain degree of luck involved that Darrisaw did fall all the way to 23rd, but it worked out. And so to me, that trade is basically an A+. I don't see how you could view it as anything other than a huge win.
Yeah, it was like watching the reactions on Twitter where everyone was just like, no, like could have had him, and then just sitting there and it's like we were texting back and forth like he's still there, and then at some point it was like we're gonna get him,
right.
And for him to be there and to get those 2/3 just feels like incredible value. And I know I was watching something earlier today and or just realized that also by picking Darrisaw at 23 versus 14, that's a lower cap hit too.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's all staggered. I mean, like the first overall pick makes more money than the 32nd overall pick, et cetera, right? And so, it's not going to be huge. It's not the difference between a Kirk Cousins contract and a, whoever, a rookie punter contract, but there still is a difference. And for the Vikings, the difference is significant, right? For a lot of teams where you're kind of penny pinching, that's a big deal. And so I think it's really an excellent first round in that it gave. So you always want to marry need and value, right? With these picks, ideally. So you're picking a player who fills a need, which certainly we can say that left tackle is a need without question. But then you don't want to do that by reaching. You want to get good value. You want to make sure that someone who, at the very least, is worthy of that slot, or for some reason is more valuable than that slot, should have gone higher, but for some reason is available. And I think that with Darrisaw, you really did marry need and value. There's a clear need, obviously, and the value you get at 23rd is fantastic. It's fantastic.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And like you said, there's so much of what you're doing is dependent on what everyone else is doing in front of you.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, like you said, like they got, you can call it lucky, you can call it maybe they had some intel. These guys are obviously plugged in, and while they don't know exactly who's going to pick who, there is some assessments, and they've done some work on figuring out where people are going. But yeah, this just feels like an absolute win of a deal, and super exciting. And then when you look at the haul, it's Darrisaw, Mond, and Davis, and that's huge. And I don't know if you have anything else you want to say on Darrisaw before we switch to second down.
The only thing I'll say, I was reading this recently from a political commentator, but he was saying that Twitter is the place where reason thought goes to die. And so in the aftermath of some of this stuff, when you see these things with teams and sports or anything really, just be careful of this Twitter reaction, because oftentimes it doesn't end up being right in the end.
Yeah. So second down, we've got the 4 third-round picks, and there was a lot of ammunition here. And I know this third round that you said, the second round, it would have been nice to have a pick.
Yes.
And there was a little bit of surprise of maybe they could use one of these third round picks to move up to the second round. They held with their 4 picks, and it was pretty busy. What pick to you, I guess, stands out the most?
I mean, I'm most excited about Wyatt Davis. I think that was, again, we talk about marrying need and value. That is just fantastic. The way that they're able to get him at 86th, and he's probably a starter on day 1. So I'm most excited about Davis. I'm most surprised about Kellen Mond. I'm not surprised that they are interested in Kellen Mond, because I've mentioned him before on TVG. I know that they had representatives at his pro day, so obviously they were doing their homework on him. And you can kind of connect the dots, and you see, okay, they need a backup quarterback. They've got all these picks. You've got these mid-round guys. They've done their homework on this particular person. Is it conceivable that they could make this choice? Well, of course it is, right? It's not exactly rocket science. You can kind of connect the dots and see, okay, this could work. What's surprising to me is that they did that 66th, right? And so that is, I mean, there's 32 teams in the NFL. And so you just do the math, 64 picks, that's the end of your second round. So 66th, you're 2 picks into the third round. You're basically a late second rounder. If you want to kind of frame it that way, you're just out of the second round. And so it's a relatively high pick overall. And so it's interesting to me. It's not surprising that they addressed the need. I thought that they would. It's just surprising to me that they chose to do so there. But I'm not displeased with it. I don't think it's necessarily a bad move. I just think it's a surprising move.
Right. So within that, are you thinking that like Mon could have been available later, or are you thinking that you just take a later quarterback?
Well, looking back now, I don't actually think he would have been available later, because you had that run on quarterbacks. You had Kyle Trask go, and then you had Mon go, and then you had Davis Mills go. And they were so you had the big 5. And then after the big 5, you kind of had that consensus 3 where Trask and Mond and Davis, and depending on who you talk to, they would, maybe say, oh, well, Trask is the better prospect, or Mond is the better prospect for these reasons, or whatever the case may be. So I think that if they did wait, they would have missed their guy. They would have missed. And at the end of the day, I mean, the Sams of the world, the Kyles of the world, people who talk about it, we want to talk about it in terms of value and big boards and all of this stuff. But at the end of the day, that's not in all likelihood, to me, it's not really about that for teams. I think a lot of times, getting good value based off these consensus big boards and stuff like that. I think at the end of the day, they probably have a different criteria, and they say to themselves, well, look, if I can step away from the third round and get Mond, but then also get Wyatt Davis, then that's a success, right? And so you're kind of assessing the board as a whole and saying, well, I got depth here, i.e. at interior line, and I don't have depth here, i.e. at quarterback position. And so I'm going to take the quarterback now because I'm quite confident that I can take the guard at, later on at 86, which turned out to be the case. And so I think that they probably have a different criteria and different thinking in terms of how they proceed. And at the end of the day, Spielman's job isn't to get good value based off, the popular boards that are available on the Draft Network or on Pro Football Focus. Spielman's job is to make the Minnesota Vikings a better football team, and ideally to be able to compete and win a Super Bowl. And so, again, it's just a bit of a different framework, and so it makes sense that they proceeded in the manner that they did. I just think it was surprising, and I wouldn't have anticipated that.
Yeah, like to me, when I saw it, I was like, absolutely. Obviously, I think we could say there are greater needs on a team than a backup QB in terms of the starting roster that you maybe could have addressed in third round.
Yep.
But if quarterback is the most important position on the team. Yep. And if Kirk goes down for any stretch of time, whether it's a drive, whether it's a game, whether it's 4 games, Mond becomes and fills in for that most important position.
Right.
And
exactly.
like you said, it seems actually probably like he wouldn't have been there later. And you need to get a guy that you truly believe in, that you think, hey, this guy can at some point take over this job. Right. And we've seen the way quarterbacks work, and it is so hard to find the spot. I know everyone can complain about Kirk Cousins, but if you didn't have Kirk Cousins and you had to find a quarterback right now, who are you going to find? Because teams just don't have quarterbacks they're willing to give away that are top guys or that can help you win a game.
Right.
And so for me, it's like that backup quarterback position is actually more important, I think, than some of the spots on that starting lineup because of how important the position is. And so you get your guy. And to me, this seems like the ideal situation. You have him wait for a couple of years. Maybe he gets in for a drive or two at different points. And who knows what will happen. But what do you think even just about what this means for Kirk Cousins?
I don't want to read into it too much. I know that, Chad Graff over at The Athletic, well, I really like Chad Graff. I think he does great work. He's mentioned that it's, he's used the term succession plan. So they have at least somewhat of a plan in place for a couple years down the road for life beyond Kirk Cousins. I don't necessarily believe that that's the case. I don't necessarily believe that this signals that they're ready for life after Cousins. What this signals to me is that, like Sam is saying, backup quarterback is tremendously important. You shouldn't have to convince Vikings fans of how important it is. I mean, just in 2017, we had a magical season. It ended obviously in heartbreak, but we got to the NFC Championship game because our backup quarterback was so exciting and so dynamic. So Case Keenum came in and allowed us to go 13-3. And I mean, that was incredible, right? And so, and now I don't necessarily think that, Kellen Mond can come in and bring us to 13-3, but I do think he's a better option than what they currently had. And I do think that if Sean Mannion was in there, or if Nate Stanley or Jake Browning, kind of the two, I mean, Browning's an undrafted free agent, Nate Stanley was a late round pick. I just don't think any of those 3 guys would be capable of leading that kind of season where we could still be competitive. Where Kellen Mond, at least, the impression I haven't watched him play. I'm no expert by any means, but everything I've read about him suggests that he's super tough. He's super competitive. He's a great leader. He's got a good arm. He's a good athlete, highly intelligent. He's about the team. He has all these characteristics and these attributes, and you partnered with this athletic ability, then I say, okay, that's tremendous, right? And so you just, the perfect kind of makeup and attributes and characteristics that you want for your backup quarterback. and then he can learn, and who knows, maybe in 2-3 years he will be the starter, or maybe he'll just end up being an excellent backup quarterback, which in and of itself is really, really great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that this also just, I've seen people talk about like just lighting a fire under Cousins' butt and pushing him a little bit, and not that to me it seems like the perfect situation because you're not actually worried about Mon. Like even if he goes lights out in camp, he's not taking over for Kirk Cousins.
Right, exactly.
But he is this piece that now it's like, oh, like there is this guy that's pushing people, and maybe even this is not Jordan Love from last year. Like this is not taking a first round pick on a backup quarterback, but in similar way, you take a quarterback early when you already have your quarterback, and you kind of piss him off a little bit. Rodgers just was ticked off last year, and he had an MVP season. I'm not saying that Cousins will have an MVP season. If he does, then that is great news for the Vikings. But to get the fire under a Cousins' butt a little bit and say, you know what, like you need to perform well, I think can only go positive. I know that's easy to say now, but that feels relatively encouraging.
I would say so as well. Like I know immediately after RG3 came out and made those comments about, how Cousins is not going to be happy about this. I mean, I don't know, right? Like I just like at the end of the day, that's just speculation from him. And who knows at the end of the day? Like I think at the end Cousins is a professional. He always says and does the right things, it would seem. What he actually believes and feels on the inside, I have no way of knowing. But my full expectation is that Cousins will take this in stride, show up to work. There's going to be no drama, no issues. And ideally, exactly what Sam was saying, it's not that it makes your status insecure, but you see it and you can say, I need to perform now. That next contract after these next 2 years, I need to show them now in the present that I'm worth it, that I can actually still be the man in Minnesota. And so to me, it's a fine line because I think the Jordan Love pick was stupid. But here, this could actually end up being very brilliant, and it could end up getting the best out of Cousins, which is exactly what we need.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know we've talked a little bit about Wyatt Davis. Any of the other picks in the third round, maybe you want to touch a little bit more on Davis, but I know Barrett, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that pick, because I know there was lots of humming and hawing about that one.
I think the other two picks, they got a linebacker, and then they got a linebacker, and then they got a defensive end. So the defensive end, I think it makes sense to go this position. And again, when you read about, if you go to the Draft Network, if you go to the Athletic, if you go to Pro Football Focus, and you read about Patrick Jones, and you could say, okay, like this is a player who kind of fits with what Minnesota wants to do in terms of what they like from their defensive linemen. And so I think that he just comes in and he's good competition with DJ Wonnum and Stephen Weatherly. In all likelihood, he's a backup and someone who is going to develop, and Andre Patterson is going to hopefully get the most out of him in the end, because he's an excellent defensive line coach. And then for Chaz Surratt, the linebacker, I understand some of the skepticism in that he's already 24, he's quite raw, because he just transitioned to linebacker like a couple years ago or something like that. He was quarterback before. But again, you look at the characteristics, both in terms of just, work ethic, like how much he's been able to accomplish in such a short time, and then his athletic abilities. The Vikings always choose a linebacker in the draft. They've chosen linebacker for years and years. It just always happens. And so I think with him, it makes some sense in that Barr's gone after a year, in all likelihood, because he's going to be a free agent. And so you bring in this depth. I mean, these two moves, the linebacker and the defensive end, those are more so depth moves right now. Whereas, and Kellen Mond, I guess you could say the same thing. It's a depth move as well. The hope being that at linebacker and defensive ends, these guys can contribute, but on a limited role. Kellen Mond ideally doesn't see the field at all, except for maybe if there's a blowout or if there's something like that, then get him on the field, and that's great. Wyatt Davis, on the other hand, I think the expectation is that he's going to be a starter on day one. And I think that in all likelihood, again, I'm not a coach. This isn't my decision. To me, I think it's probably going to be at right guard. Just strictly because that's where he played in college. So it makes some sense to start him there. And then if he isn't at right guard, if you put him at left guard, that means you're going to have an all-rookie left side. So Darrisaw and Davis, which I'm not saying it can't work. It's possible that it could work and actually be better than what they had last year. But it'd be a little bit surprising to me. Especially the line is going to be so young. Brian O'Neill, he's still on his rookie contract, and he's your veteran. And then you have Garrett Bradbury, he's a third-year guy, and then Ezra Cleveland's a second-year guy, and then you have two rookies. So you get a fourth-year player, a third-year player, a second-year player, and two rookies. I think your oldest player is 25 years old. So to me, it's just going to be very interesting how they navigate that youth. I think there's upside here, but I think they could easily be overmatched if it's not done correctly. So we'll see. I think Wyatt Davis is going to end up being the starting right guard. And to me, that's very, very exciting.
Oh, it's super exciting to know. Like we said, there was definitely one hole that needed to be addressed on that offensive line,
yes.
and likely two. And who knows? Maybe there's still a signing to come to shore up some depth there to provide some competition, and that's great. I realized I think I might have made a mistake. I might have said Barrett, but the Chaz Surratt. When I saw that pick, and like I instantly I had never heard of him. I'm not a huge draft person, but started reading up on him, and even someone I saw said that he's a day one talent with day two is a day two value pick, and it's like, it's great. And I know that you obviously want some surefire things in the third round, but with the 11 picks the Vikings had, I think it's okay to take a chance on some of these guys. And like you said, it's not like he's filling a starting role.
No.
Take a chance, see what happens. And maybe this is, like you said, a late bloomer who really, from the highlights I did see of him, like maybe this is a guy that really just continues to develop and really becomes a really solid piece on the defensive front. Yep.
That would be ideal. Yeah.
And with third down, I know this week we're only going to be able to cover the first 3 rounds here, and we're looking forward to next pod breaking down rounds 4 to 7, because there's a lot of exciting picks there that I think will garner some good discussion. We're not even going to do odds and ends today, but we do want to wrap up just looking around the NFC North. And to be fair, I think that it was a very exciting past week for the NFC North. And when we look around at the other teams, how do you feel like the other teams did over draft weekend?
I think it'd be safe to say, and I think most people would probably agree, that the NFC North as a whole, the division as a whole, had an excellent draft weekend, except for the Packers. I think the Bears did excellent. I think the Lions did excellent. I think the Vikings, truthfully, probably didn't do as well as those two, but they did quite well. I think they did really good. And then I think the Packers did poorly. And I know I'm biased, but because I obviously I dislike the Packers the most, but I just think what the Bears did to get Justin Fields, again, you talk about marrying need and value. A massive need, and then to get Fields at 11th, even though it cost them all that draft capital to move there, I think it makes sense. And then with the Lions starting off with going Penei Sewell at 7th, so need and value, fantastic. And then going defensive interior, 2nd round and 3rd round, fantastic. Like I just think that both those teams did really, really well. I don't know what the Packers are thinking, but I think that the Bears and the Lions and the Vikings come away from the weekend looking pretty good. And I can't really say the same about Green Bay.
Yeah, I feel like this is the second year, maybe even more in a row, that the Packers just, it feels like you're kind of wondering and looking around. It just feels like they're there, they're close, they're competing for this Super Bowl position, and they seem to bobble this draft,
right?
Which is difficult. And really, this isn't even the biggest news of
right, exactly.
There was something else about the Packers that I can recall.
What was that? I just don't know what to make of this. I feel quite confident that Aaron Rodgers loves being in the news. He seems to, all of this stuff seems to come up quite commonly with him about being displeased about this or that, or I don't even know what. But at the end of the day, I do believe he'll still be Green Bay's quarterback in the end. And I do believe that he'll still be back with the team. He's still going to be an excellent quarterback. Whether he's happy with that, I can't say. I can't really look into his mind and see what he's thinking or what he believes. But I just can't understand why. You talk about, so to me, it's about marrying need and value. And so they picked that cornerback, Stokes, at 29th. And so there's a need there. And cornerback is a premier position. You need good coverage, right? Like I see the desire to pick a corner. I just don't see the value for that particular player at that draft slot. And so it's very peculiar to me. Again, I mean, the leadership over in Green Bay, they know far more about football than I ever will. I can never even pretend to come close to their knowledge. And so we'll see in the end. And everything we say today doesn't mean a damn thing, right? At the end of the day, we're going to have to wait 3, 4, 5 years and see how these drafts turn out. But I just don't understand what Green Bay was thinking. I think they weren't able to marry need and value. I think they just went for need and didn't get good value. And I just don't understand why they're not doing more to really go for it all when they have Aaron Rodgers. To me, that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I did see that Aaron Rodgers was upset that it came out in the news, which
right,
of course.
Yeah. Okay.
And I saw that the GM said that they weren't trading him ever, which
right.
I've never heard before.
Right.
And then someone actually get traded. Like, it feels like there's this cycle with how this is the GM playbook 101. Deny everything and then trade him 3 days later. It would be great news if they traded him for the Vikings, especially out of the conference. Get him out of the conference. Ship him off wherever. I know Denver was so close, which turns out not yet. But yeah, it does feel. I don't know. From a Vikings standpoint, I feel like it's actually exciting in the sense of just creating some turmoil in that city and there. But I know I did transition away from the draft a little bit and agree. Like, Chicago and Detroit had good drafts, and we initially said a few weeks ago that we were feeling good about none of these teams actually improving so far in the division in terms of what they had done in free agency. But it is fair to say that Chicago and Detroit both had good drafts. I know I sent over the NFL draft grades that are from a bunch of different analysis that they take their draft grading and combine it together and give it a GPA. And I know that Chicago finished first and Detroit finished 8th. You got the Vikings at 13. And I like this Justin Fields pick. This could turn out to be quite significant. And this could be much more significant than lining up against Mitch Trubisky. I will say this, that I will not be surprised if in their rookie seasons, if Justin Fields has the best season out of all 4 of them. I don't know if Trey Lance actually plays. I know Lawrence and Wilson are both in poor teams. And I can foresee Fields having the best year out of, and I don't know, maybe you include Daniel Jones in there, or sorry, not Daniel Jones, Mac Jones in there. Which I doubt, but I think that he'll probably have the best rookie season out of all those top 4 rookie quarterbacks.
I just don't understand how Fields got to 11th overall. I just think it's such a great pick for Chicago. And I mean, again, who knows? 3, 4, 5 years, maybe Justin Fields is a bust. I mean, maybe Trevor Lawrence is a bust. Maybe any of these guys are a bust. Who really knows at the end of the day? At best, you're making an educated guess where you gather this info and you do your best to project. Does this make Chicago a contender in year 1? I don't necessarily think so, just because I think there are still some deficiencies on that team, and they were so limited in what they could do in free agency by their salary cap. I think they'll be a fine team. I wouldn't be surprised if they snuck into the playoffs like they did, or like they've done. But I don't know if this necessarily elevates them this year to being like a true Super Bowl contender, even though they're still going to have a strong defense. They're still going to have a pretty good team overall. So we'll see. We'll see. I think at the end of the day, you still got to put the Packers probably number one in the division, and then it's a toss-up between the Vikings and the Bears. The Lions are still building. I don't think Jared Goff is scaring anybody, but they did get better, and they at least are building on that foundation with those linemen that they picked in their opening three rounds. So who knows what the Lions will be in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But
at this point, we've talked about it, like the Vikings really, not that they don't care about the window outside of that, but this 1 to 2 year window,
yes,
is
exactly
the window. At least for the way the team's constructed, the way the management's constructed. So in some ways, you don't really care that Chicago's going to be better in a few years. Like, while these teams did improve, even just the Rodgers news, like you're hoping to get that, compete for that division title. You're hoping to get to the playoffs and compete. And while these teams are better around them, there still does feel like hope. I still feel like the Vikings have that number 2 spot in the division right now, but there's still some off season, still things can change. But feeling pretty good about where the Vikings are at, especially with addressing what they did in the draft.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty fair assessment. I mean, you can't, until they actually go out and show that they're better than the Packers, well, then the Packers need to be considered number 1. And then after that, I think it's reasonable to kind of take the other 3 and say, well, who's kind of the main challenger right now? And I think it's probably pretty reasonable to say it's the Vikings. But we're just going to have to see what happens in the field. Doesn't matter what Sam thinks, doesn't matter what I think. The only thing that really matters at the end of the day is what actually happens on the football field. And so we'll see. Hopefully the things that they do now, decisions they make now, actually lead to good results on the field.
Yeah. Now we only have to wait, 4 months?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Oh, man, what a grind. This is good and this is fun. I think that the draft brings a lot of excitement for the coming year, and this is going to be, I don't know. I feel like Vikings fans there's still the PTSD that comes with cheering for this team, and you can see different reactions of people, but overall, I feel like you got to be relatively encouraged about how this draft went. And I think there's a lot of exciting things, and there's some exciting things in these later rounds that we'll talk about next time we talk in a couple of weeks. We're not going to do odds and ends this week, and so we're going to wrap up here. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to stop by VikingsGazette.com for great Minnesota Vikings news, commentary, and analysis. The Vikings Gazette can be found on Twitter and Facebook at Vikings Gazette. Take care, everyone, and we will talk with you in a couple weeks.